Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. An unusual, different Saturday night. I've got a beer, so everything's all right. We have got well, Saturday night for me. If Bruce joins us, of course, it's Sunday morning for him and very early. Let's go the full syllable act before we start talking about the new proposed regulations in the UK. So let's start on the right-hand side of me and ask if everyone can introduce themselves. What's your name and where do you come from, as Scylla would say? We start with Danny.
Go on, Danny.
Danny Rose. I'm currently based down in Salisbury. I'm from the Isle of Man. Anybody who knows the TT races knows what the Isle of Man's about, so that's where I come from. And so I've been flying commercial UAVs since 2013, so old school. So here I am.
You can go next, Dave.
Thanks, mate. So David Walters, working at Consortic, been in commercial US environment for about 6 years, operating under my own PFCO for 4 years, and now the lead software development manager for Consortic.
Keep rolling. Who wants to go next? Anyone?
Yeah, go on then. I'll go next. Tim Rome. I'm currently working as an air traffic controller. I've been involved with commercial UAVs for 3.5 years, mostly fixed wing rather than multi-rotor, flying in the north of Scotland as well as most of the rest of the UK.
Oh, dare to be different. Who wants to go next? Go on then. Go on then. Go on then. Go on then. Go on, Dave.
Dave wants to go.
Yeah, Dave Holton, aerial view, Mr. Angry Northwest. Flying and building UAVs since 2010, and very interested in what's going to come out of the current legislation. Interesting to hear all your views on it as well.
Hi guys, Nick Rogers, Chief Regulatory and Training Officer at Sky Futures, also one of the co-founders. That's what it says on the tin. I look after regulations and training at Sky Futures.
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Richard Parker. I'm the founder and CEO of Altitude Angel, and we make UTM technologies and data available to UAV companies and drone operators around the world.
And I'm Neil Kidd. I'm the CTO at Altitude Angel, as well as doing UTM systems. I spend quite a lot of time in Brussels talking to the EU, EASA and CESAR around kind of the upcoming use-based proposals.
Right. Okay. So good. Thanks very much everyone for joining us. You're all commercial flyers in the UK, or one way or another, or you all have interesting commercial businesses. So, have you lot destroyed model aircraft flying in England then?
I wouldn't say that's actually the case. I think the press release that was put out in the early hours was obviously very skittish. The DFT obviously released the documents this morning. I think it was about 9 o'clock. And some of the points that I picked out today, actually, I believe could be quite positive for the commercial and the recreational. The fact that they're actually speaking to the end users as opposed to doing a Canada and just wiping the floor with everyone. They understand that drones can be used safely. They're exploring the additional tech that can be utilised. They understand the requirements for insurance, and we've got the BMFA, and we've got FPV UK. The pilot training aspect for the recreational stuff, from what I've seen, is actually going to be based online only. There's no, you've got to actually physically go through a flight test that you do with the commercial side of things. And the fact that they want the UK to be the lead, it's clearly stated in that document. They want us to be the forefront, of the drone industry moving forward. And I think if it's implemented in the right way, we could absolutely be that. I think there's a bit of scaremongering going on between the recreational users who are now in fear that they won't be able to go and do their hobby. That's my 2 cents.
Well, what is the feeling on that? What? Because at the end of the day, the Department of Transport have given us no clues how it's going to finally look. So, has anyone got any ideas of how it might look for model aircraft flyers?
I think
I don't think there's going to be
the
much change. I don't think any reason why there should be too much change at this point. Model aircraft flyers have existed this whole time, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, quite successfully with no problems, no issues whatsoever. And then the rise of the drone, and then it starts causing problems. And this is all stemmed from people flying them places where they shouldn't, really. It's not really aimed at commercial users. It's aimed at the people who are doing the wrong things with them. But unfortunately, it has that knock-on effect where now everybody is going to suffer. You know, it's like when the naughty kid at school does something wrong, everybody gets punished, and everybody's seeing this as a punishment. You know, will it solve the issue? If the main issue is people flying them where they shouldn't be, you know, doing the wrong things with them, or, you know, invading privacy or whatever the other people's issues are, then, you know, I don't think it'll solve it 100%, but you do get, it will help. But as for the model aircraft flyers, I mean, I started out, you know, 2010 flying RC helicopters, all fine, no problems, flying clubs, training, help, support. Now it's very different. You don't need that. You know, whether you're flying helicopters, you could go and you had to join a club because they're complicated machines, and you know, you've heard of people flying them before, and you know, oh, I bought one, crashed it, never flew it again, stayed in the box, because they are complicated. Now the likes of DJI have made it so easy for you to just go out, pull it out the box, and be what I call a GPS hero, and, you know, fly it around and do your thing, and that's okay. But yeah, it has ruffled a lot of feathers, even to the point where you will find some more traditional flying clubs won't actually allow drone multi-rotor pilots to enter their clubs. So, you know, there's also not just the regulatory thing, but there's also like a deep-rooted issue with amongst just regular model flyers to drones to make it go, well, you're ruining it for the rest of us. But I wouldn't say that's the case in 99% of cases.
And I think that people are going to be fairly used to going out, buying a bit of kit, taking it home, activate it online. Surely, if you're buying a drone, take it home, plug it in, do the quiz, do the training, and it activates online, you're doing exactly the same as you're used to doing anyway with a lot of kit. Nothing's particularly changed there. The only difference is that you're being checked that you're doing a little bit of training. I don't see that it's going to stop anybody from flying a drone legitimately. It's merely checking that they've done something about appreciating that they're flying in an aviation environment.
Okay, so this is my next question then. What's a drone?
Oh.
They would say, I think a drone would be an aircraft fitted with a camera, because that seems to be where people seem to have a problem. Beforehand, when it was just aircraft flying, helicopters, planes, you know, multi-rotors before, in the old days, where putting a camera on something would be a super complicated procedure. Drones now are, you know, anything. I think they define it as anything that can fly autonomously. But I think really what people are most concerned about is things that fly autonomously that have a camera on it. But I mean, there still needs some official definition to be put out there, I think, because it is causing some people some confusion, and everyone's thinking, well, is my aircraft a drone? Well, I don't know.
I'll just throw my 2 pence in, but we've got some proper grown-ups here that should know. But as far as I'm concerned, anything that can sustain flight, be controlled in 3-axis from the ground, and doesn't have a pilot on board is considered an unmanned aircraft, or can be. That's one iteration that's gone around lots of times. But again, in the in the documentation released today, they didn't tell us, did they? They didn't give us a definition. Does anybody have a clue as to what the definition is?
No, I think it will be focused around the typical view of a drone, a Phantom, you know, the Uniques, anything that's multi-rotor style. That's what appears to be, you know, what they're dancing around. I think with the destruction testings, I don't think they actually flew a polystyrene fixed wing into a plane windscreen, because when you read the descriptions about the crash testing, it's about motors being exposed, it's about motors being shielded by plastic, and as we know, with the fixed wing aircraft and the model aircraft, you know, in some cases that can be the case, but I think ultimately they are talking about a multi-rotor type.
David, they did test a fixed wing aircraft on those windscreen tests.
Did they? Oh, okay. I must have missed that then.
Yeah, no, it was one with an engine at the front rather than a pusher, and it went straight through.
Oh, interesting.
Well, it would. What was it? Was it a glow motor or something?
Well, I mean, the thing they say is it went through with the helicopter wasn't moving, so just on the airspeed that the fixed wing aircraft was capable of doing itself.
Does
Yeah,
that mean
so then straight away you've got more speed.
But I mean, this wasn't model aircraft territory. This is kind of quite a large fixed wing drone.
And surely we're just going to make stronger helicopter windscreens.
Well, you do wonder who sits behind a non-bird strike resistant helicopter windscreen and thinks that's a good idea to fly.
Well, yes, absolutely. So obviously you're familiar with the test, and Neil, did they? I
mean, I've read the document. I think
read the document. Oh, okay,
yeah.
no more than I than any of us had. So what do we think of the idea of the licensing, individual or this written online test, and what sorts of questions are going to be, and what's the point? And at the end of the day, bad actors are still going to be bad actors. In the comments, Mark Strong's saying that, and he's also saying right now that the word drone is scaremongering. Well, I actually quite like it. Well, I don't like it, but it because it comes from a tiger moth, so that's why I like the word drone. But anyway, yeah, I wish people would see that. Do we think this test is going to do anything? Is any of this going to stop bad actors, I suppose, is what I want to say?
It may not necessarily stop them, but it does make us look like we're being transparent and above board. And at the end of the day, it's the Daily Mail headline that will kill us. And if we can say, yeah, guys, look, we're doing everything we possibly can, that's got to be a good thing.
Fair enough. Now, with your air traffic kit on, when somebody rings up and says, I'm going to fly down the road, do you and your colleagues give them a hard time? Or do you, how do you judge a good telephone conversation with a drone operator?
In the north of Scotland, we tend to know them all anyway, but you get a feel for how they sound, what they're saying. If the fact that they're able to telephone us, and that's one of the things we've got to do as an industry, is there's an awful lot of people out on the forums, or does anybody have the number for XYZ air traffic control unit? If you're operating in an aviation environment, you need to be speaking aviation and know where to find that information, because that's where all the other information about the environment you're flying in is. The same place that you find the telephone number tells you the airspace, tells you everything else you need to know.
And that's quite a nice segue actually into what Altitude Angel does, because they provide that data into an app and all that sort of goodness, all that appy goodness, and a website as well, and it's very good. And I've had lots of reason recently to compare and contrast the airspace shown on Altitude Angel and the airspace shown by major manufacturers' no-fly zones, and there's quite a difference, and it's quite shocking. I see the government wanted to help them along with geofencing, and they wanted to be more active. Do you know about that, the guys from Altitude Angel?
So I think it's a welcome idea, right? Now, if you look at the responses in the consultation, most people think that it's a great idea to have a central source of that information that lots of government departments can kind of feed into, and then the community can get access to. And I think, as you pointed out earlier on, it's really one of our goals to make sure that all the aviation-related information, as well as other hazard information that will help you more safely fly your drone, is available in a format that anyone can understand, whether you're well-trained or you're less well-trained. And I think going back to that issue of registration, that's, for me, it's not designed really to stop bad actors. It's designed to stop or reduce significantly the number of amateurs kind of coming into the airspace who haven't had any form of training or awareness, and perhaps previously have only really kind of spoken to their mates who have flown a drone or gone onto a forum where they're picking up other bits of snippets of information like ATC traffic phone numbers. But they could benefit from being able to understand and interpret that information, knowing that it's also accurate. So for us, as I say, it's about making it accurate, making it easy for people to get access to, but then helping them interpret that data as well.
I see in the comments somebody's mentioned AirMap and SkyVector. SkyVector is very good, but what I'll say about AirMap is that's some of the data that's used in DJI stuff, and really, I've said it before on our normal Tuesday night show. Bad aviation data is almost as good as no. You might as well have none at all. You're better off having none at all than having inaccurate and bad data.
Absolutely.
You know, and if there's any doubt, get yourself a paper chart. They're fantastic. They work every time. As long as you got a candle, you're A for away and know how to read it. But I don't think there's going to be that sort of requirement, is there? Especially in the testing. Again, we don't really have any idea, do we, as to how it's going to look.
I think they need to make it as simple as possible for people. They need to make it like, because at the moment, what you tend to find is that you go on the forums and you go on the websites and you know, the Facebook groups, and they're always saying, well, you know, my interpretation of the rules is this. Well, I think it's that. Well, I'm right. Well, I'm right. But actually, and the CAA don't make it easy. They actually make it very, in some areas, quite confusing. They just go, well, we've given this person this permission, and we've given this person that permission, and the wording is very loose. And then you get a nice diagram, and then this bubble rule thing came about, and it was like, okay, well, I can fly 50 meters over towns and cities, and that's fine. But then people were forgetting about like 241, etc., and it's just it's too confusing. They just need to make it super simple, and it's not necessarily for the commercial operator, for your day-to-day you know, user of UAVs, drones, that are just going to take one little bit that they want to know and go, right, okay, yeah, I'm fine to fly in that town because it says this bubble, but actually it's not. They're not seeing the whole picture, and it's too confusing, and they need to just whittle it down, make it super easy, change the air navigation order to sort of reflect the modern usage of drones, and take it from there, because it's, at the moment, it's just all over the place, and loads of people have got loads of ideas, and it's not.
So the response to the consultation does talk quite a lot about rewriting and rewording the air navigation to make it much easier to understand. I think what I picked up, which I thought was quite an interesting point, is that as well as talking about the standard 2 articles around UAVs and small UAVs, they referenced article 239 of the ANO around airspace infringements. And basically what that's about is that when the NOTAM office, which for the UK is NATS, issue a temporary flight restriction to say you can't fly in that area, is about being prosecuted under that rule. And a specific paragraph in the consultation was talking about increasing the limit on the fines that you can pay. So even if you've got a paper chart, they don't get updated when a NOTAM gets issued, when there's a TFR. There were events that have happened over London recently where TFRs happen very quickly, and there's very little advance notice. So I think we are moving into a world where you have to have an application or some software that actually supports your understanding of both airspace, but keeps this up to date. And the stuff that GA uses at the moment in terms of paper charts, and it isn't really going to be fit for purpose for what the rules are now, and certainly as we start to move forward.
I think what would be better as well, though, I think the document was saying about the ownership needs to be put on the manufacturers, and that's all well and good, but a lot of manufacturers use different data providers for their products. I think what would be the better option is if the NNAs, CAAs actually took responsibility of their own airspace and their airspace data, and they managed to control it. They set up their own API that was available, that could then be integrated into every single system on the market. The system knows where you're flying, it has your GPS position, and can accurately pick up the airspace for where you're flying. Dave's waving at me, so Mr. Halton.
Yeah, doesn't New Zealand have that?
I think they do.
So
yeah, exactly, and that's been so for maybe 2 or 3 years, and I just don't understand why that can't be implemented. If it can be implemented in New Zealand, then it's got to be able to be implemented here, and that is a case where before you fly, a bit like the new NATS app, you know, for the drone pilots, or for us, you know, you say, am I safe to fly here? Yes, you are. That is automatically sent up to the cloud, and it's distributed automatically. Why can't that happen here?
Well, I was going to lead on. How are they going to do this? There's talk of electronic conspicuity, but there's no way this new system would mean everyone go out and buy yourself a ping and jump onto the ADSB system. So they must be talking about apps dobbing you in, governor, dobbing you in every time you fly. And if that's the case, how does that work with traditional model aircraft? Or are we thinking they're going to be kept out of this altogether?
I think traditional model aircrafts are normally flown at sites where they are flown. They're not just flown from a local park or a sandhill. You know, in Southport now we've got the PGA World, whatever it is, knocking a white ball around a load of green fields, and you know, anybody can walk in the sandhill now. I could go tonight and fly out the sandhill and go and fly across Royal Birkdale. But if it was a case of a commercial operator can go, well, okay, this is where I am, and this is where I'm going to fly, and I'm going to fly there tomorrow, even if it's like an emergency situation where we work for the HSL, where we may go to an emergency situation like Didcot or any of the other ones, you know, there's already no time in place, but we can notify straight away that we're going to be flying. And I think in New Zealand, that's how it operates. You know, if you're a commercial operator, you notify, even if it's minutes before you fly, and you get an instant response. Yeah, it's all down to phone signals and all that, but you know, God, we're in a new world here. We're not in, you know, we're not, paper maps are gone. You know, yeah, we can all have the aviation maps and know what the airspace is, but what about military airspace? Who teaches about notifying military low-fly zones? Nobody.
Do they not? Are you not a military low-fly zones not mentioned over there? Well, LFAs and
in the
flower
UK,
arrows.
they're not in the UK.
Not
So
really.
nobody talks about the. Oh, okay. I've not been over there for a while. I
Well,
like
actually,
because I'm an old duffer.
it might be a good point to bring Tim here, because Tim, you've had some
Yeah.
close calls with some military aircraft whilst surveying, haven't you?
I may have got reasonably close to one or two, yes.
I've done that myself. I've been flying up in the Highlands and the jets or whatever, doing transmission tower inspection with Cyberhawk, and they very often fly very low. They'd use the transmission tower lines and the substation as a target, as a bomb run. So yeah, you were doing your inspection of your tower, and then bam, you know, your jet would be right over the top of you before you knew what was going on. So yeah, they do get,
Yeah,
they do get a bit cozy.
We were regularly flying 400 feet AGL in an area where jets were flying at 250 feet AGL. Yeah, I do have one picture of the top of a Hercules.
Right.
I think we've all got those.
But isn't there a way of notifying where you're operating? I do, because I operate in the Lake District quite a lot. Then you can actually ring up and tell them where you're flying. If they take notice of it, fine. But as you know, with a jet, you know, it's past you before you've heard it. So it's not just us that needs to take responsibility.
I think you have to take cognizance that you're. Sorry, I think you have to take cognizance of which low flying area you're in, and take note of the flow arrows on a 1 to 50,000, 1 to 500,000 chart. Again, does Altitude Angel have that marked up in the app? And similarly, many of those targets, as you suggested, the practice targets are used day in, day out. There's books of them. Let's go off and do this one and this one and this one. So those could easily be on the apps as well. I don't know.
Well, hang on a minute. So you can also go online and see where they're supposedly flying. Every day you can see where they are notified where the flying areas are.
Yeah, flying areas in the UK don't change.
It must be summer in the UK. Very good.
Just to touch on that, I think Dave raised a good point actually. Going back about places to fly, I think if they are going to push forward, with this kind of proposed legislation, we need to give people the spaces and places where they can fly. I mean, I've got places near me, although I say near me, 45 minutes, Newport Pagnell. They've got a lovely park there, and there's a sign, clear as day, if you are a BMFA member, you can fly here. They even cut a grass strip for landing and taking off a fixed-wing aircraft. You don't pay anything. It's a nice public park, and you can fly there. And I think there needs to be, more support for, enabling areas for drone operators, recreational, the Model Association. Give them more places to fly. That needs to happen. And I think if they can be classed as safe zones on an app somewhere, and you can look where your nearest safe zone is to fly, let's say recreationally, maybe that's another thing to look at.
But then it
Yeah,
stems down to the
get that.
people who buy these things. They want cool pictures of something smart. They want a bridge. They want a town. They want a water feature, whatever. That, you know, flying in a field with your camera that you've just paid $2,000 for or whatever doesn't look very interesting to people. You know, so it's just like they're just going to go, I'm not going to go fly there because that looks really boring. You know, why have I got this camera for? I want to get a cool picture of something, and off they go. You know, and if they've had a bad experience from a BMFA club as well, which happens a lot, then it's you know what I mean. It's never going to work. But there does need to be an attitude change, you know, for it all to work. We can all integrate really nicely into the airspace as we have done for a long time. It just takes a little bit of work to make it happen.
I think it's worth thinking about where we're going as a drone industry in terms of where the future is. So I think everybody on this call is probably very keen to be able to unlock the possibility of going beyond visual line of sight. So there's quite a lot that needs to be done in terms of the CAA at the moment will require kind of individual safety cases if you want to go BVLOS in the UK. We're very much in the case of wanting to be able to make that much more of an easily repeatable process, and to have a set of standard processes and tools, etc., to allow you to fly routine BVLOS operations. After that, we start talking about autonomous drones and highly automated drones, where there may not be a remote pilot. The pilot is a computer on board, and it's relying on a set of sensor packages and information that's sent to it digitally to ensure that it stays safe. So throughout all this kind of evolution of the industry, any extra information we can give to either it's a human remote pilot flying BVLOS or it's an autonomous drone, then it is going to improve the safety of the system. If we're able to talk about where people are flying VLOS drones for recreational use, if we know there's a drone in that area, then that's fantastic. We're talking about model aircraft flyers. If we're able to feed that information into the system, it makes the whole system much safer. So I think from a UTM and a U-space point of view, as much information we can get as possible. Now, what's going on at the moment in terms of the scale of the use of drones around the country doesn't warrant that, but I think we're we're at the start of a journey now where the industry is just going to start getting bigger and bigger, and we'll see a massive proliferation of drones in our skies. And we need to start making sure that the regulatory environment we've got and the rules that fit with kind of UTM and around BVLOS, etc., account for all of this stuff. Because realistically, from a legislative point of view, we get one chance to write this, right? There's certainly within years before it gets revisited. So we need to make sure that we can account for the future of the drone industry in those regulations that are being written now. So I think all things around kind of geospace, geo-awareness services, registration, etc., are all very key building blocks for that future.
But aren't we at a place where people like yourselves, the smart people that are out there, can build a modern system, and we are being shackled, the industry is being shackled by trying to fit in with traditional aviation? We could actually be a few leaps ahead.
That is very much the case. I mean, I spend a lot of time arguing for the fact that the UTM and U-space is actually a software project. It's about computers talking to computers. Whether there's a human being remotely flying the drone or not, the thing that's actually flying the autopilot is a computer. We want to be able to give as much information to that service for it to be able to operate safely, and that's going to come from another computer. There's no way that with the number of drones we're talking potentially rolling out around the world, that we're going to be able to have human beings kind of supporting those. We won't have humans in the loop for the majority of these use cases. It's all digital. Now that is a concept that most people that are within traditional aviation find very uncomfortable. It's very much something that is outside the entirety of their experience, about there not being a human in the loop. That a drone could take off, get clearance to fly, be given instructions on collision avoidance, and that's coming out of a computer system, and there's no human there, and there's all sorts of interesting liability questions. And then the drone gets to the place where it needs to go and goes and flies its next mission, and it's all done without a human being involved in that. And that is something that traditional aviation is uncomfortable with, and we've got quite a large education. We've got a lot to do to educate them.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think Neil's right up to a point. There are issues with integrating drones into commercial aviation. But I think the bigger issue is until we've got the public on side, then that's never going to happen. And at the moment, for as long as we keep getting headlines on the front of newspapers that say drone got too close to an aircraft on finals at Heathrow, then there's never going to be a public opinion in our favour to move the industry forward in that way. Whereas if we put the proposals in place now that have been proposed this morning, we're showing that we're open, we're honest, we're above board, we're doing our very best to make sure that the right people are flying drones in the right place. Drone itself becomes less of a pejorative term, and at that point, public opinion says these are a good thing. How can we integrate them into everything else that's happening? But you've got to get over that first hurdle for everything else to follow.
You know, and that's a great example. You know, is it a drone or is it a bat? I mean, Australia, the near miss, it turns out that it was a bat. It wasn't a drone. You know, and I think going back to this registration system, the UTM, and, you know, I mean, I have quite a good understanding of how the Altitude Angel system works, as we're integrated and we use them as a partner for CQNet. You know, and I think if hobbyists were to adopt an app, they could, even using it from today, you know, they're already sharing their own personal information by registering with that app. They do it when they sign up for the BMFA. You do it when you sign up for FPV UK for your insurance. You know, we're not, I say, not as such data sensitive as the guys in the US who don't want to share even where they live with any government. You know, they're quite data sensitive. But I think in the UK, when you're joining these clubs, you're giving up your data anyway from a registration point of view. So I think that kind of negates the fear of, you know, having to register against the system. And I think even if we only capture 60% of the UK market, whether it's commercial or recreational, and they're using an app, they're submitting the flight plans, they've got an area where they want to fly, it goes through the UTM, everyone's notified of who's flying where, and if, God forbid, there was an incident, you know, at least you're not then chasing after potentially a rogue drone operator, because you might know that it was a hobbyist nearby and, you know, for whatever happened, they had an issue or a flyaway, you know, that could have been the potential, you know, cause for concern. Okay, you're not going to get the rogue operators signing necessarily up to the system, but if we've got a system in place where we can inform, we can educate, we can advise, one central registration system, surely that's got to be the best for everyone, you know, moving forward.
Absolutely.
I mean, every system, DJI system, they're registered. You know, they're registered with DJI. Why can't that be integrated into the registration process?
Well, some might suggest that for manufacturers, yes, that's the perfect way forward, because they can also get into the micropayment regime of. That's one of the big worries about UTM, is it becomes pay to play. It might only be a dollar or a pound. It's not worth as much now, is it? Anyway, it might not be so much. But you know, pay to play is a big worry about UTMs. Why should people come in with these fancy UTMs and decide it's going to be like this when 10 years ago I could have done what I like? How do they get away with that? I don't quite understand the need for UTMs. Let's take the American market. I think there might even be close to 60,000 Part 107 pilots over there. So people that might use the UTM in America, the number is 60,000. That's the size of the market. It's not X billion like people keep putting up and all this. It's 60,000 pilots at the moment. I know, yeah, I guess Neil's going to come back and say, but they'll be gone soon. It'll all be they'll all be autonomous, completely autonomous flights. So the number of pilots doesn't matter. But
I'm going to come back, but that wasn't what I was going to say.
Oh, all right. But the rush to UTMs really, really worries me, and it worries me for pay to play. This government stuff now worries me because it might hamper a little bit of error modelling, and I was involved in that. But we don't know. The devils made a noise about it, but didn't give us the full information, did they? Which was very, very naughty of them, really. They should have given us fuller information, and I think they don't. They've bogged off until September, haven't they, over there? So we're not going to hear any more until then. Anyway, I'll stop ranting. Carry on. Someone take over for me. Goodness.
So in the defence of UTM, can I just say that?
Each other. Go ahead, Neil.
Oh, just in the defence of UTM, so it's very much about kind of where the future is, and I think you're right in terms of the volumes of drones that are in airspace at the moment. Then UTM is a bit overkill. I think we can all imagine a future where that isn't the case, and I think we can all imagine a future that's not too far away, where we do have very congested pieces of airspace. And some of those would be around, if you imagine kind of a logistics and a depot for a delivery company, then we need some mechanism of being able to schedule drones in and out of the delivery center at the right time, and making sure that they deconflict with one another. We potentially need to look to making sure that we can deconflict with manned aviation if we've got BVLOS drones flying through CTRs or ATZs, etc., to make sure things actually all work together. So we need to start building the standards and processes that are required to build this system. Now, once we, I mean, exactly as comments were made earlier on about being able to build registration directly into the drone, so the drone supports whatever protocols are required to be able to, as you buy the drone, you plug it into your PC, you go into your PC and you register, and the drone automatically then gets codes to unlock itself, or however that system would work. Then that's a bunch of technical standards and services that need to be standardized across large markets. So if you think about someone like DJI, they were asked recently by the Netherlands, the CAA in the Netherlands, to do something specific for the Netherlands. And the view was that the Netherlands is only one small country, and that they don't make changes on a countryside basis. So what we need to do is be able to look to standardize this stuff in much larger blocks. So the EU is a good one. The US is a good one. The EU is currently just over 500 million people in terms of that market. So developing a set of common standards for drones that get sold across the EU means that it brings the price of drones down. We're not UK only standards, and you've got to buy a drone that will only work in the UK. That's a great way of really hampering the drone services industry inside the UK. So we need to get all this work done in much larger blocks rather than just on a country by country basis. That work is underway in Europe. We're also a significant player within an organisation called the Global UTM Association, and that is trying to undertake the task of developing a lot of these standards, and hopefully they'll get adopted around the world. But the sooner we start, the sooner we get this done. And we don't want to be suddenly waking up and thinking, you know what, we really do need a UTM system today because it's getting really quite dangerous in some congested areas. We need to be working on this several years in advance of there being real need for that. And I think if we are to believe even a fraction of the predictions about where drone growth could go, then we're going to need this stuff. So let's get it out there quickly and start making use of it as quickly as possible, because it really will help.
Yeah, and I don't think DJI have got any right in dictating their market to countries like the Netherlands. If the Netherlands say, if you want to supply drones into this country, this is the regulation you're going to have to adopt to them drones. DJI need to kick up the arse. You know, they need to understand that.
You're going to get one.
That's a valid point. That goes back to the CAA and the NAA having the control over the airspace data, managing that airspace data in a sense of authorizing the layout and what's where, etc., the structure of it. But then if they are registered, if you're registered as a recreational user, your drone's got an ID, or a commercial user, when I go and do a survey at Heathrow or wherever, and the DJI system says, oh, you must go through my authorization process. No, I'm a commercial operator who already has a permission in the UK to be able to operate at this airport and inspect this structure. If it was managed by the CAA and NA, and using their process, their system could already identify off the registration system that I am an approved commercial operator and I can fly my aircraft in this airspace. You know, where at the moment, the drone manufacturers appear to now be the regulators and are now controlling it. And in my opinion, that's the wrong way.
So I think that's exactly what UTM and USpace is. That is what the vision is. That control gets handed to the regulators, whether it's the national authority or if it's across Europe, it's EASA. I don't think any drone manufacturers wants the responsibility and the liability of declaring where people can and can't fly. I mean, that's real hurts them as far as their market's concerned when people can't fly a drone in places they could do. The risk of kind of liability about people flying near airports has obviously put geofencing in, a very primitive form of geofencing that most drone manufacturers ship. So I think they would love to be able to divorce themselves of that responsibility and pass it off to the NAA. It's more, does the NAA want it?
I think the NAA can be made responsible for the airspace and the application of the rule. but I see no reason why the manufacturer shouldn't be responsible for collecting the data in the first place to pass on to them.
Yep.
We need a system to pass it on to, though, right? And I think the interesting thing about UTM is that we forget that it plays out on the timeline. If we go back 4 or 5 years, geofencing really wasn't a thing. So to lambast the manufacturers on one hand for not allowing you to take off because you're authorized in that place. Go back a few years, we were all complaining that these machines would fly anywhere and do anything. So there's a knee-jerk reaction by the manufacturers to restrict their products being flown in places that they think they shouldn't be. Which is why I think coming towards today's announcements for DFT, this was a great first step in kind of saying, okay, well, what we need to do is actually provide a centralized authoritative repository, not just of where you can and cannot fly your drone, but also identity information. And actually then perhaps manufacturers will be incentivized to use that because that information will be securely available to make their products better. And that's the interesting thing, right? What we don't want is anyone disincentivized from using that information. So providing that the identity information can be blended with the map information, in other words, creating a personalized no-fly zone map so that, for example, David, with his qualifications, he can fly over Heathrow Airport and do his fantastic surveys. And the manufacturer needs to do nothing other than connect to that system and that personal information flow to that drone and flow through to that control app. That's the dream, right? But we have to take those steps. And that's, for me, that's why, UTM is actually lots of different systems all coming together to provide a solution. Well, one of those systems is registration, both of the pilot and the drone or the drones that they own. The other one is a very important one around providing consolidated good information. Now, there still isn't in any country, as far as I'm aware today, a single authoritative source of all of that data. And I think that's what's really promising here about seeing these proposals.
And I think just to add to that, I mean, just as Richard said, we tend to talk about registration, or we talk about the platforms, the systems, BVLOS, visual line of sight. Obviously, HAPS is another player that's coming into this space here. Absolutely everything has to be interoperable within the airspace as we go forwards. And actually, if we don't achieve that, then we're not going to solve the problem in its entirety. And I think, as Richard and Neil have both alluded to, it's really important that we stick to the vision. And the consultation is a very first stab at, I suppose the UK government trying to deal with hobbyists on the one hand, trying to deal with the recreational users on the other hand, and obviously the commercial players. They know that there's money to be made. There's technology to be developed through UK PLC, but also they know that they have to try and keep everybody on board. But actually, ultimately, at its core, they do at least realise that this system is a scrum of technologies, one which is hardware, software, other things like perhaps ADS-B, existing stuff that sits in the manned aviation space, and actually things like that are moving on. I know we said that in the manned world, for example, a lot of the software mods through Airbus at the moment, they're handling things like TCAS resolution advisories automatically, and it's monitored by the pilot. So with a foot in both camps, I can say that there's a lot of movement going on there to enable the technology to do the job as best as it can. So across the system, we have to try and integrate it, and that's our big challenge.
So Neil, you seem to know a lot about this UTM business. Who's going to pay for it then?
So I think when we talk about USpace within Europe, so USpace is Europe's flavour of UTM, that's described as being a set of services and processes that you can use when you want to go and fly. And if you were flying VLOS recreationally, you wouldn't be using any of those services because there are already legislative ways that you can already fly that type of mission. If you want to fly BVLOS, or you want to fly a highly automated flight so that your human operator is only in control of maybe 10–15% of that flight all the time they're supervising 5 or 6 different drones, then you probably are going to be using some of the services for that UTM offers. Otherwise, you don't get the blanket approval just to be able to fly that type of mission from the regulators. So at that point, there's very much a commercial benefit for being able to do those BVLOS operations. If there is no commercial benefit for BVLOS operations, then I think we're all for a bit of a shock, and that the drone industry isn't going to evolve like we think. But the people that are using these services of UTM are people that are gaining commercial benefit from it. And we need to make sure that the system works for people that don't need the service of UTM. They shouldn't be paying for it. we should be able to gather information from them to make the system safer. So if we know that there's a VLOS drone recreational flight going on, then we can route BVLOS operations around it, but it shouldn't necessarily be mandatory for them to declare that. But more information, the safer it is.
So away from all the drones, everything's good, everything's ticking through, everything's flying around, it's good, and there's manned aviation still happening. What's the interface look like with Tim up in Inverness there? How do these things hand off to the manned aviation world?
So we get into a sliding scale of kind of whether it's a quadcopter or a small fixed wings drone, all the way up to a 747 that's had its that has its cockpit and life support systems taken out of it, and it's now fully automated. Obviously, that system is going to really need to integrate with existing ATM processes or the new ATM processes, because they're going to be needing to use the airport to land and take off. But I think one of the interesting questions we start to talk about when we talk about ATM integrations around prioritization of different types of airframe or different types of mission. And we have to account for the fact that at some point, drones will be flying missions that should be regarded as a higher priority than manned aviation. So that, I mean, if you look at the extreme examples, then you could well be looking at a drone that's flying at the human organ from to someone that's in an operating theatre waiting for it to arrive. At that point, everything gets out of their way, right? It could be missions that the security services are using for surveillance, etc. And at that point, MI5 was like, I'm not going to know ones, but you know the types of organisations I'm talking about, that they will be able to turn around to the air traffic control authorities and say, actually, we're flying this surveillance mission, route stuff around it, please. So there are edge cases, but there will be cases where drones will have a higher priority over manned aviation, and we do need to make sure that at that point those drone operations are available to the air traffic control, and the controller then is able to see where they are and route traffic around them. So there absolutely has to be an integration there into the ATM systems.
So
yeah, I mean, those flights already happen within manned aviation, where you get a flight that's pre-notified, the route comes out, this is what it's going to be doing, this is when it'll hit these points, this is the level it'll hit these points at, and you watch this flight fly across your radar and you move everything round about it out of its way, and then you crack on again. It's possible now with somebody sitting in the cockpit of an aircraft that you never talk to. I see absolutely no reason why it wouldn't be possible with an aircraft with nobody sitting in the cockpit.
In its concept, sorry, go.
Sorry, the jump I wanted to make was, how's that going to appear on the screen? Because the unmanned aircraft world's full of smart people. I'm hoping that the aircraft's not going to be using ADS-B, for instance. I don't know why we'd move towards a 30-year-old standard. This business should be looking at the 2060, not something that was made in 1990. So how will it appear on the screen? How will it appear on Tim's screen? Will it be data pulled in and obviously electronically chucked up from whatever system is sending the position back from the aircraft?
So what we'd expect to happen is take a telemetry stream off the unmanned vehicle. That could be coming over a variety of services, and what we're looking to do is define different capability models for this tracking service, put some performance requirements around it, and that then creates an open market for different types of hardware solutions to solve that. So I'm damn sure the 5G guys are going to be looking to solve this problem. I think the ADS-B guys are also going to try and solve the problem, and that it may well be you end up with a deployment of ADS-B receivers in areas that maybe are doing BVLOS operations as a way of competing against maybe the 5G stuff. I'm sure the satellite guys have got their own solutions to this. So the UTM system is receiving a telemetry stream from the drone about where it actually is, and if that is something that we need to make ATM aware of, then we have an interface into the ATM system, and it appears on on Tim's radar screen as though a flight would. However, it's not got there because it's broadcasting an ADS-B signal. We've got the location from this different tracking service. So there's an interesting piece of integration work that needs to be done.
The Commodus transponder.
At its heart, though, it's absolutely critical that the system is multiple bearer. It has to be across, and I think if we're talking about differences between potential 5G, obviously ADS-B gets talked about a lot, but they've got the UAT system in the States, which actually broadcasts a certain amount of information, integrated something like that. And one of the things, one of my big pushes
towards government has been that actually in the UK we're desperate for some more spectrum. You know, there's some very good spectrum that, you know, we could utilise very effectively, I think, if we could get hold of it, and that would be across the 868, potentially, you know, some bit more 1090, but you know, there's a huge amount there's a huge amount of spectrum that's currently unused that is not 2.4 gigahertz or across the usual mobile channels that we could really readily use, I think, in this country.
Yeah, it's interesting, and whatever standard that comes up, one would hope that the UTM providers will be looking for something like I don't know, a LoRa radio based tracking system that the hobbyists can integrate with some sort of open SDR based receiver system and can drop it into where I'm going for is a low cost electronic conspicuity solution for the average modeler, so it doesn't really cost them a fortune. For those of you that,
all of this sounds amazing, you know, all sounds really good. The UTM sounds great, blah blah, but the hobbyist, you know, your guy is not going to do that. He's not going to want to do that. That sounds like a lot of hassle to the average hobbyist. So we're just going to go.
There's a LoRa radio and a GPS. That's a tracking solution that will cost you about $15, and you put an SDR receiver up there. But what I'm missing, if I wanted to obviously put it in a nice case and then sell it for 60 times more, but what I need is I need that standard way of talking to a UTM, that way to say, hello, this is me, this is my thing, it's only me, don't worry, carry on. So yeah, I look forward to that standard. Sorry, moving it all off topic a bit, aren't I?
I think we need to remember as well that it's likely that the recreational users won't have this burden upon them, right? I think Neil touched on the concept of something called capability levels, which is a concept of actually not needing to overburden certain classes of users or certain categories of users with the much higher burdens for position information and telemetry that will be placed on others that wish to benefit from complex BVLOS operations. So what this might mean in practice is, actually, if you're flying VLOS and you're flying recreationally, then all you need to do is pick up your phone, dial the app in to where you're going to fly and click fly now. And actually, you get a little 500-meter bubble that pops up around you. Job's done. No new equipment, no new drones. Nothing needs to be done other than a quick report. But actually, if you want to fly a 75-kilo cargo drone between two massive airports over 300 miles beyond visual line of sight, then actually you need some pretty solid equipment to be able to do that, to be able to announce your presence to other people. So actually, for me, again, it comes back to we have to not necessarily look at the end game and think that that's the problem we're trying to solve. There are lots of different actors with lots of different requirements. But the one thing that underpins them all is they all need better information, and we could all benefit from better information about who's flying what, where, and when. That's what this consultation is doing, right? It's seeking to provide information about who, what they're flying, and where they intend to do it. Those are three areas that, you know, we're proud to be associated with. That's what we do on a daily basis for our users all around the world. And we hope that mechanism can help to unlock that kind of capability level aspect going forward. So for us, when we say UTM, that's really a more comprehensive view, and that's where we're focusing.
I think that touches on the NASA UTM. One of their main tenets is flexibility where possible and structure where necessary. And, you know, that's got to be the way in which we're driving, and it certainly seems the way in which, you know, the consultation is pushing as well. So I think that's positive.
No,
I think the thing is as well, though, what we need to think about is, you know, there's no timeline at the moment for this project, and what happens in the short term. You know, what happens if this comes
the timeline is technology.
The incidences of whatever happened at Gatwick or whatever is maybe pushed this forward, perhaps. Maybe because it's pretty clear that they've not put as much information as we would like, so maybe they're under a bit of pressure to go, right, let's push this out now so that they seem to be doing something. Actually, maybe they should have spent a bit more time, asked a few more questions, and, you know, gone around it that way. Because really what this is about at the moment is your problem drone fire. You know, it really boils down to that. You know, the commercial operators will comply. We will fit the systems, whatever's required of us. We will follow the rules. We will fly where we're supposed to, not fly where we're not supposed to, etc., etc. It's the hobbyist who, you know, wants to go and fly by Heathrow and cause problems. That's the issue in the short term, and that's what people. And I think somebody, I can't remember who touched on it before about public perception. So they want to be seen to be doing something now, but I don't think it's enough at this time. You know what I mean? But then you need to get manufacturers on board, you need to get everybody else on board, and then in the background, the UTM, etc., is working, and then bam, you're at a nice solution. But short term, you know what I mean? They need to do a little bit more.
So well, Rich, is there a timeline? Because when I was looking through the document, the only date I could see that was referenced was try and get something in place by the 2020. I couldn't see anything.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of future-looking statements in there, but I think if you bury yourself down in the document in the detail somewhere, it talks about, I think, Project Chatham occurring within 6 months. I think Chatham is all about the next phase of integration between drone pilots and airport operators, private facility operators, kind of like they're doing with Lance in the US. So it's I think it's also the geofencing aspect of that. But I think that the government realises there's an opportunity to move and to move quickly. But again, I think for those of us that have been involved in that consultation process all along, we're keen to point out that a knee-jerk reaction is not the right reaction at all. Otherwise, we'll end up with a registration system that gets deployed and then repealed, or we will have to re-register again because actually it's not fit for what we want to do 3 years from now. I think it's right to take the time, publish what we've got, publish what's available, but also then get something out quickly so that we can start iterating and bringing it to the market as quickly as possible.
In the comments, Mark Strong said, would any legislation stop what occurred at Gatwick? I think what occurred at Gatwick happened before the hacking all broke out. And I think if you look at that manufacturer's aviation data for Gatwick, on the western side of the runway where it happened, their no-fly zone stopped about to 200 meters from the end of the runway. So that was duff information from the outset. And people also firmly believing that what they got on their app is what is true. And Altitude Angel, I know it's very good, but people are flying in places because there's the information isn't on their apps. And someone else I've got to mention in the comment has said, well, why should people have to undergo privacy training? Do hot air balloon pilots undergo privacy training? I'm a hot air balloon pilot. No, I haven't undergone privacy training, but I do have big binoculars. So I don't know if we can address privacy and things like that, because somebody's obviously worried about that.
Well, that's a classic one.
Look at the
police helicopter pilots this week that were charged for using a police helicopter for things they shouldn't have been using it for. And people are concerned about drones.
NEA should be worried about privacy or not, because whilst obviously they should be concerned about safety, should privacy fall into their remit? I mean, if you look at what the EASA are doing with their with the NPA, the current proposed drone regulations for Europe, that they have a criteria about whether the drone has got a 5 megapixel camera on it, because if it's more than 5 megapixels, then their view is that it's a privacy concern, which is somewhat an arbitrary number and doesn't account for what the length of the lens is on there, which is probably slightly more appropriate than the number of megapixels the camera's got. So I can't help but think regulators have a feeling that they have to be involved in the privacy conversation, and perhaps we need to push back to them and say that actually do you, or are there already existing regulations around this?
No, I agree. So talking about pushing back, can model flyers push back? Because they're the group that's most worried that you guys are ruining the hobby. Can they push back? What is the process? What's the consultation involved now? What can be done? No one knows.
I think they're fully counted within the process of the consultation. So, and clearly there's the good actors and the bad actors out there. We need to, but they're fully counted as part of it. And like I said, I think there's 3 distinct groups: the recreational drone users, for want of a better word. There's the hobbyists, and then there's the commercial users. So I feel like everybody has their say within the consultation, which I suppose was what the questions were driving at, when it came out.
But I think the key thing to touch on that as well, though, is when they had the consultation, there was only 678 responses. So if you look at the commercial sector, there are over 3,500 for permissions for commercial operation out at the moment. You've got the best part of 80,000 maybe recreational hobbies pilots at least in the UK airspace, flying on a regular basis, and there was only 678 responses to this article. You know, and would this document be structured the way it is if that maybe that response had a few more zeros on the end? You know, and I think maybe this should have been more publicised within the BMFA, the FPV guys, you know, and better within the commercial sector, because I'm pretty sure that that number would be a lot higher, because if they realise the implications that were coming into place with such a low response, and reading the report, actually, they seemed quite pleased with the report numbers, and I read it and I was dismayed. I couldn't believe it. I was really surprised.
I think if they did it again now, now that this all on the news and there's drones being asked to register, etc., whatever the timeline may be, I think if they did it again, you'd get a much bigger response, because it's on national television, it's had a lot of coverage. Now your average recreational pilot's going to go, hang on a minute, does that mean I'm going to be affected? And then you're going to start getting more and more. So they need to perhaps, once they've asked some more questions, you know, once they've done a bit more research, ask some more questions. You know, what's your opinion now? What do you think about this now? Now that we've had this, you've read the first document, what about now? And so, you know, it's got to be an ever-evolving process. Otherwise, you know, people are just going to feel left out. And
I think the document does open that up, because certainly when it talks about registration, it leaves it open in terms of what the format of that registration is, and whether that if you're a model flyer, whether the club that you belong to is an appropriate body for that registration. So I think that the DFT have very much kind of taken the view that they still need people's input into it. They've listened to what people's concerns are, and I'm kind of encouraged from that point of view that they've not just said, "Oh, we're going to do it this way." That they are still looking to learn the best implementation for it.
Rich, with the Altitude Angel, how many flights? How many flights have been put through Altitude Angel since the beginning of the year? Have you got a rough number?
The last time I looked, we were looking over the last quarter. I think we'd tracked something like 40,000 optionally reported flights. So those are folks who are just, you know, using the apps, pressing a button, and then reporting that they're flying in that field at that time, doing this particular type of operation. So I think, you know, those that want to do the right thing know how to do it almost. And I think definitely a bit more national attention on that will help. Giving them better tools, better, you know, more accurate data and more guidance are all really, really good things. But yeah, I think it comes back to that central principle, right? We want to share information with as many folks as possible. Registration in the whole is a good thing. I think coming back to your point about the number of respondents in the report, quite a lot of those people were actually associations. So, you know, you may have had a count of one, but it might have been the BMFA, you know, counted another one, and that's another association. So I think a lot of voices were heard. But I think now what will happen is, as these things start to get implemented, there will be a tighter feedback loop in what's happening. So if you continue to read through that document, they talk about pilot programs and projects. Those are all really, you know, code words for, we're going to try this out and see how it works, and then adapt and refine. And I think that's a really positive message.
So what's the takeaway from this then? We shouldn't be quite as worried as everybody's getting online, but we should pay perhaps a little bit more attention to what's going on.
I think from a commercial operators' point of view, it doesn't really affect us a huge amount. We already follow the rules and regulations, and we know all about it. This more affects the recreational and the hobbyist user at this stage, you know, and then we'll see how it develops. But yeah, I can see why people would get upset about it. You know, this big thing comes out, oh, you've got to register your drone. Obviously, when it all happened in America and everyone got really upset, and then that chap won that case and got it repealed, etc., etc. People just have this vision in their mind that it's going to be worst case scenario, and it's, you know, it's going to cost everyone $5. It's not.
Well, we shall see. We shall see what they bring out. Look, we've gone over the hour, which is bad news. Did anyone else have anything in particular they wanted to say about this subject before we sign off? Going once, going twice. And with that, I'll say thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for taking the time out on your Saturday evening to talk about some of this. Look at these, oh, DGR prizes. Yes, Mark. We know we'll talk about that on Tuesday. Anyway, so thanks very much for for joining us. Like, dislike, add some more comments in the bottom if you want to, subscribe if you haven't already, and we will do this again at 2100 GMT, our normal Tuesday slot. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We will reach out to you again if things develop. Good night to you.
Thanks, Gary.
Bye.
Good luck, guys.